You're listening to In the Balance, an Iowa Judicial Branch podcast. Welcome back. This month, I spoke with Judge Patrick McElyea about what a typical day might look like in the life of a district court judge in the 7th Judicial District. To learn more about the types of cases a district court judge can hear, the differences between a bench trial and a jury trial, and what fills a judge's time when they aren't on the bench, keep listening. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today, Judge McElyea. Before we dive in, tell me a bit about your path to the district court bench.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for asking me to do the interview. And I want to give you props on the pronunciation. My last name is often very difficult, so I appreciate that. My path to the bench was one predominantly of public service. So I began my career after graduating from Drake Law School working in Marengo, Iowa, kind of a small community, county seat town with a firm that was part-time county attorney and part-time private practice. The goal there being to kind of see both sides of what I thought was kind of legal life, getting to represent the folks of Iowa County, as well as seeing what a small town firm looked like. And then I continued on through a couple of different county attorneys' offices throughout the state, and then spent a year in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Davenport before applying to be on the bench. And that was really after just a number of conversations with folks that encouraged me to apply. And fortunately, it worked out well for me.
So you did make that switch from arguing before the bench as an attorney to sitting behind it as a judge, and you've had some encouragement. What was kind of the deciding factor for you to make that move?
I think the encouragement from other people is big. And as we talk a lot in the judicial branch, I think about folks or applicant pools being smaller. I think it's important for us as judges and for other attorneys to encourage people who they think would make good judges to apply. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we're always kind of keeping an eye out for. What really made me want to do it outside of knowing that I had support from people within my community and the legal community in the area was, as I said, I spent the bulk of my career in public service, and that's important to me. And so I wanted to continue on that route, but I also wanted to be in a situation where I could provide some resolution to people and some closure to people. And I still enjoy the idea of being a trial attorney. When I preside over trials, I still miss it. But at the end of the day, what I really enjoy is being in a position where I get to do what I think is the best thing for that case, rather than necessarily arguing for a position solely based on whichever party I represent. And so I really like kind of having that middle role. People, including my significant other, give me a hard time about wanting to fix things all the time. And so I think on the one hand, that can be a challenge as a judge, but on the other hand, it can be a real joy to, sit down and you listen to a dispute and you provide a resolution. And not everybody's happy walking out of that courtroom, but, you've provided them with a decision that they weren't able to work out among themselves. And that's a very rewarding feeling. And I enjoy just being in that role that, like I said, I get to listen to both sides of those disputes and do the best thing make the best decision that I can within the bounds of the law in that situation.
Absolutely. So we are actually beginning a new series for the podcast that is looking at a day in the life of our judicial officers and staff, starting with you as a district court judge. So kind of overarching, what types of cases and issues do district court judges preside over?
We are kind of what commonly are called courts of general jurisdiction, meaning we have a wide variety of cases that come before us. And I'm sure, as you know, all of our judicial districts are going to handle their dockets a little bit differently. But in the 7th, we hear everything from criminal jury trials to family law cases to disputes over estate planning or, probates. We have issues related to, civil lawsuits, which could range from car accidents to med mal. We have property disputes. We really run the gamut. And one of the more fun things, and I think we'll talk about this a little later, is that no 2 days are the same. Mm-hmm. We start our jury trials on Mondays in the 7th. And so I can spend Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in a jury trial. And on Thursday, I can be in a different county dealing with family law matters, dealing with, motions for summary judgment. And on Friday, I could spend the day dealing with protective orders or things of that nature. And so you have a smattering of different issues in a given week. Mm-hmm. And I really like that as compared to, I think, some of my colleagues will spend a year doing family law or 2 years doing criminal law. Now, on the one hand, you have some certainty as to what your schedule is going to look like. You may have a little bit more control over your cases, so there's definitely some benefits there. But from my standpoint, I'm going in and out of criminal, civil, family, probate throughout a given week all the time. And so it really kind of keeps you on your toes. You get to learn a lot of different things. You get to see a lot of different lawyers. And so it kind of keeps things fresh.
And I know you just mentioned, all the variety that you see, but what does a quote unquote typical day look like for you if one does exist?
I think outside of presiding over a trial, a typical day might include a morning where you might be dealing with criminal matters. So I might have 4 or 5 or more sentencings, let's say. Or you might have some guilty pleas that are going to be on the record. And then in the afternoon, you could have, in our district, we do temporary custody cases. We call them 80-minute cases. Each side gets 40 minutes to make their argument. Each client can testify, and then we render a decision on a temporary custody case. You might have 2 of those in the afternoon. And so that kind of takes up your afternoon. But that's just one example. We have many situations where we will have a full court service day in one of our other maybe smaller counties. And that really is kind of that typical criminal in the morning. So motions, maybe a motion to suppress, maybe a sentencing, maybe a guilty plea. And then the afternoon could be family law matters, could be a settlement conference. We do judge-led settlement conferences, which are essentially mediation. And so we might deal with that on a civil case. We might deal with that on a family law case. We might have 2 or 3 of them in an afternoon.
And a district court judge, as you mentioned, oversees jury trials and then bench trials. And you were currently seeing a larger jury trial in a county in your district. Can you tell me how your role differs from a bench trial versus a jury trial?
It differs a great deal. So in a jury trial, you really need to be mindful of, the jury is the fact finder. We kind of joke in our world that during a jury trial, by and large, my job as the judge is to kind of call balls and strikes, if you will, handle objections, handle legal questions. And I often say part of my job is to kind of keep the train on the tracks. You're more of a manager, if you will. And I think that was something that was a little bit surprising to me going on the bench, because trying jury trials, I don't know that I really fully appreciated what's going on behind the scenes for the judge. While you're dealing with the legal issues that are in front of you, obviously you're listening and taking notes in case there are any motions throughout the trial, but you're also checking in with the attorneys at every single break. Hey, who are our next witnesses? What's our timing looking like? Because you're in charge of that jury. And so you've got court staff who are wanting to make sure that they're telling the jurors, the break's going to be a little bit longer in the morning because we've got to wait for a witness. We've got to deal with a legal issue outside their presence. And you're just kind of managing the schedule. Maybe you're kind of pushing the attorneys a little bit because, after all, attorneys enjoy being in the courtroom and enjoy talking. And so you've got to make sure that they're aware that there's a schedule. And I've got court administration wanting to check in with me to find out how many days is your trial going to go, so that we know, can we send you to a different county? Can we give you a different schedule on a certain day, or do they need to plan on me still being in the jury trial? And so there's a lot going on in the background that you're kind of managing. You certainly, and I think we see this sometimes on the national stage with some judges, you certainly don't want to do anything that would impact how the jury views either attorney or either side in that trial. You're wearing the black robe for a reason. You're impartial. We give them a special instruction that nothing I have said or done during the trial was intended to give any opinion as to what I think about the trial. You don't want to, be too hard on the attorneys in front of the jury, because you don't want the jury to get mad at them. If we're running late, maybe because an attorney was running late or a witness was running late, I will often try to take the blame for them. I will say I had some things I needed to deal with, so they don't get mad at the attorneys. There's just a lot of managing of people and time and things like that. Flip it around to a bench trial, and it's really your show. Certainly, we have all of our family law cases, for example, are bench trials. Those are tried at equity, so we're going to have a lot more evidence coming in, and we get to decide the weight that we're going to give it. In a criminal or civil bench trial, we have a little bit more constraints on evidence, but at the same time, we can kind of control the pace of things. We can maybe engage with the attorneys a little bit more if there's an objection to some exhibit. Maybe we can have a little bit of a back and forth just kind of on the record versus and kind of in court, rather than in a jury trial. You're going to have to excuse the jury, make sure they don't hear certain things. And it's just a little bit more of a process. The bench trial is a little bit more free flowing, I think, and can be more efficient in a lot of respects. And I mean, the biggest thing is you just don't have to worry about how everything looks to the jury.
Right. And what are some daily aspects of being a judge that happen behind closed doors when you aren't in front of people hearing cases?
Sure. Well, I think, as probably a lot of people who might be tuning into this will know, Iowa was one of the first, if not the first state to have the entire state go to electronic court records. And so we call that EDMS, and sort of our kind of common lingo is we have what we call the queue, which are where attorneys or self-represented litigants file their documents, motions, proposed orders, things of that nature, and they kind of pile up in this queue, and those are things for us to review. And one of my colleagues has the great analogy of calling it Lucy in the Chocolate Factory, where you just have these chocolates coming so quickly and you can't keep up. And oftentimes that queue gets pretty big. And so anytime that we have sort of downtime, if you will, for example, today I'm waiting for a jury to come back, I'll be pitching in to work on the queue. And so that will be just trying to get as many orders signed as I can or processed. If there's not enough documents, then I'll correspond with the attorneys to tell them, hey, we need X, Y, or Z so that we can deal with this. You know, we also have issues that just sort of come up from clerks or court attendants. An attorney might come by alerting us to an emergency matter, and so we'll deal with that. We used to have something called order hour, where attorneys would come in every morning and they could get certain things signed. Again, as the electronic era has come, we have fewer and fewer attorneys here, but we really try to encourage them to still come down to the courthouse, come see us, talk to us about probate that you're closing. Let us know if there's anything out of the ordinary there, and we can just sit down with them, go through it, get it signed, and clean it up. So there's a lot of those little just things that kind of pop up. In our district, we do all the protective orders. We do a lot of mental health committals. So people who just come into the clerk's office, members of the public, will be filing these documents, and they'll come, the clerks will call some of the judges who don't have a heavy schedule, and they'll see if they can deal with some of those things. We have other little things that pop up, a name change. A couple wants to get married within 2 days. There's a 3-day waiting period in Iowa, so we sign those. So you have all kinds of little things that just kind of pop up throughout the day. And we're also, we're talking. The judges are, hey, I've got, this issue, or I just heard this family law case. How would you deal with this? And, we're bouncing ideas off of one another. I really make an effort to try to walk around the courthouse a little bit and socialize with the clerks or the court attendants, just so that people know you're here. It adds a little bit of that human element. And I think when we have certain counties in our district where judges aren't there every single day, it's nice when you're walking around to catch up with folks so they feel more comfortable bringing issues to you and we can deal with them. During all of that, we try to find time to write a decision if we need to, if we've got one going on. And there's no shortage of things to do sort of behind the scenes.
And what, in your experience, has been the most fulfilling part of your job as a judge?
I enjoy finishing a case. I think, you hear a family law trial, a dissolution or a custody case, and you get that decision out and you feel like you've given them closure. You've kind of moved the case on. I think that is, there's something very satisfying about that. Mm-hmm. And I think another part, as I thought about this, is that I really enjoy when we have some nuanced, kind of different legal issues. I think this is, not to say that this is an easy thing, but I think oftentimes we have similar legal issues presenting themselves on similar cases, whether it's a criminal case or a family law case. Those kind of make up probably about 80% of our docket. And so you'll hear me reference those a lot. But every now and again, we get a different legal issue. And so you really get the time to kind of drill down. You get to do a little bit of research. Maybe you get some assistance from one of the law clerks. And it just kind of piggybacking or hearkening back to one of the earlier questions, one of the things that I miss about being a lawyer is that a lot of times you had those different issues and you got to kind of really dig into them and figure out what's going on. There are times where you do get that chance to do a little bit of research to really look at this kind of nuanced issue and decide how are we going to deal with this. And it's fun. I think, people that enjoy this job are folks who are intellectually curious. All of my colleagues, I would put in that category. And so I think we like, the curveball that, gosh, I haven't seen that before. We don't deal with this too often, or maybe the law has changed. And so those are very fulfilling. And I also think, as I spoke before about managing a jury trial, you have one of the fun things about a jury trial is that oftentimes you have no clue what's going to actually happen. I mean, you think you know what certain witnesses are going to say or how people are going to react to certain pieces of evidence, but you really don't know. And so presiding over and managing a jury trial and getting it to conclusion is a very fulfilling aspect of this job.
And what would be the most challenging aspect of your role?
When I talk to people about it, I think what I always come back to as far as the most challenging is a situation where your gut feeling or where you feel like a case needs to end up or the result that you want to give to somebody is not permitted by the law. And I think that just really creates some personal tension, and that can lead to a lot of very difficult decisions that you yourself may not agree with, but that that's what you are supposed to do to follow your oath. And those can be just very difficult decisions to go home with. But at the end of the day, that is our job. Our job is to apply the law to the facts, and at times we have to just make those difficult decisions. And I think they don't come up too often. And when they do, you deal with them. And I think that speaks to having a good group of judges that you work with, because you can talk to them about it and they will understand. And they have a unique understanding of that, and you can kind of lean on them. And at the end of the day, understand that you did what you were supposed to do as a judge.
Lastly, if there is one thing you'd like to leave our listeners with about their judicial system in Iowa, what would it be?
Our job as judges is to give everybody the most fair and equitable resolution or result that we can. And I just would stress to anyone who listens to this or who walks through an Iowa courthouse that there may be times you don't like that result. There may be times that result is a tough pill to swallow. I can confidently say that the judges in Iowa and the judicial system in Iowa works very hard to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard, and that once they are heard, they get a result that is within the bounds of the law. Very few people are happy when they come into the courthouse, and even more people are unhappy when they walk out of the courthouse. And I think I just want to stress to folks that even though you may be unsatisfied with the actual result, my hope is that you are satisfied with the process and that you were heard and that you feel as though your position was considered and the result that was rendered was within the bounds of the law.
Great. Thank you so much for your time today, Judge McElyea.
Thank you very much, Marissa.
You've been listening to In the Balance, an Iowa Judicial Branch podcast hosted and produced by me, Marissa Gaal. If you would like more information about Iowa's courts, you can visit www.iowacourts.gov. You can also follow the Iowa Judicial Branch on Twitter and YouTube at Iowa Courts. This episode of In the Balance is now adjourned. Until next time.